Fear gripped people living all across metro Atlanta for 26 hours as investigators searched for a man suspected of murdering 4 people.
Brian Nichols overpowered a Fulton County deputy inside the courthouse, beat her and stole her gun, and that was the start of a deadly rampage.
And that stolen gun was then used to kill Fulton County Superior Judge and his court reporter. After leaving the courthouse, Nichols shot and killed another deputy. And that evening, he went to a home in Buckhead and shot a federal agent before stealing his gun. He pushed his way into the apartment of a woman. As he held her hostage, she was able to talk him into surrendering. Nichols, later convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
Look into the mindset of one of the most notorious active shooters in America, the most notorious in Georgia's history.
I did some very bad things.
His victims in March 2005, Judge Rowland Barnes, court reporter Julie Brandau, Deputy Hoyt Teasley, federal agent David Wilhelm.
Salutations, Serene Eminence here. It's a pleasure to proceed with the official commencement of the Vocational Volatility Channel's second series installment entitled Courthouse Homicides. Our initial series covered a compilation of 5 homicides that occurred within the Uber Eats sector of the gig economy, wherein which customers and couriers were either dismembered, shot, or stabbed to death. In this present time series, we shall be covering a compilation of homicides that have occurred within the court sector of the criminal justice system. Amidst conducting intensive research, I came across nearly 20 courthouse-related homicides. However, amidst this series, we shall solely be covering a total of 4 cases, plus a surprise bonus compilation at series end. The cases to be covered via the following series include our initial introductory episode, which involves Brian Gene Nichols, of whom went on a homicidal rampage that took the lives of 4 criminal justice personnel, including the presiding judge, a sergeant, a court reporter, and an ICE agent. He also reportedly beat a sheriff's deputy into a coma and held a woman and several others hostage. Episode 2 of the Courthouse Homicides series shall cover the following. Marianne Bachmeyer, of whom shot and killed her daughter's accused rapist and murderer in an act of vigilantism. Larry Darnell Gordon, an inmate of whom shot and killed 2 bailiffs, as well as injuring a sheriff's deputy. Sial Angelau, a defendant of whom was shot and killed by a U.S. Marshal subsequent to his attempt to violently assault a witness with a pen. And of course, episode number 3 shall inevitably be a surprise compilation as a commemorative way to conclude the Courthouse Homicides series. In accordance with content formatting for the Volatile Vocation Investigations channel, a criminal justice system briefing shall be offered, and due to the sheer volume and detail of the cases being covered, vocational volatility factors and protective safety protocols shall be touched upon throughout the series instead of being extensively separately addressed. Please feel free to reference my introductory vocational volatility video to become more closely acquainted with my credentials, my mission, as well as how you may secure true crime accoutrement and award-winning wine at a stellar steal. In the spirit of fine wine and true crime, this series shall include a total of 3 separate white wine features. The wine that shall accompany today's crime is a 2021 Via Amoroso Toscana Bianco. Lusciously light in its forward notes and lavishly layered amidst its innermost nuances. Now let's indulge in an intensively condensed criminal justice system briefing. Please know that I shall delve deeper into the vast array of nuances embedded within the various sectors of the criminal justice system as this series, as well as the Vocational Volatility channel in its entirety, evolves. Although the judiciary system does play a pivotal role in procedurally exacting justice via enforcing the law, preventing crime, protecting the public, and prosecuting perpetrators, there exists room for refinement and reformation on the levels of law enforcement, the courts, and corrections. Once a perpetrator is officially charged with a crime and subsequently pays their debt to society via serving time commensurate with the offense, the punishment does not halt there. Perpetrators with criminal records and the accused alike are perpetually punished long after their offense and or debt to society has been determinately paid. A cycle of legalized discrimination, poverty, and reincarceration inevitably ensues. A cycle that is unrelentingly upheld in large part due to the implementation of 47,000 nationwide laws and regulations that inherently serve to restrict rights and opportunities of the accused. These restrictions and limitations serve as the unseen bars of an inconspicuous cage of whose reach extends far beyond the confines of the criminal justice system, an invisible imprisonment of sorts that ultimately undermines even the most earnest of efforts of rehabilitation and redemption. Proper rehabilitation procedures and effective societal reacclimatization strategies further supports overall safety via eliminating the oftentimes unavoidably deeply ingrained circumstances that further perpetuate cycles of crime, violence, and further punishment. We must keep in mind that violence and crime are subsidiary residual effects of systematic deficits that exist along the spectrum of micro, meso, and macro levels. These insidious slippages subsequently bleed into the metaphysical fabric of all humanly interactions, from the most minuscule to the most massive. As our awareness expands regarding the true nature of the social and political constructs for which we all exist within, we may proceed to properly position ourselves in a manner for which we may take responsibility for the one thing that we actually have control over, and that is how we respond and subsequently wield our will within the world. Prior to officially proceeding with the case at hand, I would like to extend my sincerest condolences to the families and all individuals impacted by the loss of these precious lives that I shall be extensively discussing. May the unique legacies of all individuals mentioned via this video live on through the contents of this compilation and evermore exist within the hearts and memories of those of whom cared for them most. Disclaimer: viewer discretion is advised. Sensitive topics such as graphic depictions of violence shall be discussed moving forward. Please cease your viewership if you are uncomfortable to any degree with the aforementioned mature matters. Now let's delve deeply into the deleterious details of this homicidal courtroom rampage. Respective to the expansive vicinity of the crime locale, this mass murder ensued within the greater metro Atlanta area, the 9th largest metro area in the country, with a population of nearly 6.1 million. Commencing in Fulton County's Atlanta, where 3 deaths occurred, hitting a middle ground in Buckhead, where an additional murder, assault, and robbery took place, and meeting its termination in Gwinnett County's Duluth area, where a hostage situation stopped Nichols' senseless acts dead in their tracks. In relation to the date, this heinous homicidal spree transpired 18 years and 4 months ago, on March 11, 2005, a little over a week before the commencement of the spring equinox, which is spiritually associated with rebirth and renewal. In speaking of the extensive time span for which these criminal offenses unceasingly unfurled, the greater metro Atlanta area was frozen in fear for a total of 26 hours betwixt the hours of 8:45 a.m. on March 11th and 11:30 a.m. the following day on March the 12th, as investigators diligently conducted a manhunt for the perpetrator, Brian Gene Nichols, suspected of murdering 4 criminal justice personnel, as well as holding multitudinous individuals hostage.
Accused Atlanta courthouse shooter Brian Nichols sat stoically as prosecutors played for the first time in open court an audio recording of the rampage. 2 gunshots are heard on the tape. Relatives of the victims wept as they listened.
He went directly to the chambers area.
The perpetrator was originally in court to be officially retried on a rape charge. During the trial, Nichols completely overpowered Sheriff Deputy Cynthia Hall, forcefully beating her into a coma, and then proceeding to steal the deputy's gun, which was only the start of his killing rampage. The deputy's stolen gun was then utilized to shoot and kill Fulton County Superior Court Judge Rowland Barnes, as well as his court reporter, Julie Ann Brandau. The fatalities did not cease via the surrounding vicinity of the courtroom. Subsequent to escaping the courthouse, Nichols shot and killed Sergeant Hoyt Teasley. He spent the remainder of the day evading capture, and that evening he arrived at a home in Buckhead, in which he reportedly shot and killed ICE Special Agent David Wilhelm before stealing his gun and pickup truck. His final stop was in Duluth, where he forced his way into the home of a woman by the name of Ashley Smith, of whom he held hostage. As the hostage situation ran into the very next day, Mrs. Smith inspired Nichols to search for redemption and ultimately convinced Nichols to surrender via reading a portion of Rick Warren's best-selling book, The Purpose-Driven Life. Respective to the criminal charges, prosecutors convicted Nichols of committing a total of 54 crimes, including murder, kidnapping, robbery, aggravated assault on a peace officer, battery, theft, carjacking, rape, and escape. He was ultimately found guilty on all 54 counts on November 7, 2008, and was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I hereby sentence Mr. Nichols to 20 years to serve consecutive to counts 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 32.
Judge James Bodiford, who imposed the toughest sentence allowed by law, ended Saturday's hearing with a grave warning.
Do not ever trust him again, because there's been ample evidence that trusting Mr. Nichols will get you killed.
Now let's move forward with unraveling the intricacies related to possible motives. Now, in conducting extensive research, I came across a multitude of varying motives, including that of insanity, delusion, multiple attempts to escape, as well as drugs and being inspired by his very own paternal instinct.
Admits he was the gunman, but has pled not guilty by reason of insanity. It's a defense prosecutors were clearly trying to counter in their first argument before jurors.
At that point, he made a decision.
Now, in speaking of the insanity angle, although Nichols admitted to executing 4 people and assaulting many others, he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The delusive insanity defense was respective to the notion that Nichols viewed himself as a captive slave that was simply rebelling against authority in an attempt to fight for his freedom and regain control. In further expounding upon this insanity defense, whilst also examining the angles of delusions in tandem with the desire to escape, As reported by an ABC News article, Nichols claimed that deputies baited him into escaping. Defense attorneys filed a motion accusing Fulton County deputies of plotting a scenario that would allow the utilization of lethal force and inevitable justifiable killing of Nichols whilst jailed. The motion claims that deputies were encouraged to place Nichols in a recreation area, unrestrained and accompanied by a lone, armed guard. Whilst incarcerated, authorities say that Nichols attempted to enlist his pen pal girlfriend, a paralegal, and 2 sheriff deputies in a scheme to break out. Now, in speaking of Nichols sharing his sincere thoughts respective to his past criminal deeds, 11 years after the homicidal courthouse rampage, Channel 2 Action News shared an exclusive interview in which Nichols broke his silence for the first time, claiming that he remained reticent for over a decade because he didn't wish to cause any more damage than he had already inflicted. Channel 2 Action News' investigative reporter secured the following verbatim response from Nichols as he spoke candidly from the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. Respective to remorse, Nichols stated the following: "In doing an interview with you, there will be nothing that I want from that really, other than to express my remorse for the things that I've done." He mentioned that he's prayed and asked God for forgiveness. Respective to the motive, he stated, "I think I was delusional. I think that drugs and alcohol played a part in those delusions. If there is something that someone could take away from this call, it would be to recognize and understand the harm that marijuana can be." And respective to his final thoughts, he stated, "If I could go back and do things differently, of course I would. I can't play the hand I wish I was dealt. I have to play the hand that I have." Now, in touching upon the paternal instinct angle, 3 days prior to escaping, Brian Nichols learned that his son had been born. Sonia Meredith, the mother of the baby, told the Associated Press the following: "I do know that he wanted to be with the baby. He did speak about it all the time." In respects to my personal presumption, from the perspective of a forensic psychologist, I am ultimately leaning towards the desire to escape. Now, the desire to rise above the restrictive, heavy weight of an authoritative system can ultimately inspire you and incite for you to utilize extreme force so that you may thrust yourself away and out of the confines of such control. And he already had an underlying desire to escape in corresponding with the pen pal, the various deputies, and so forth. And so it was already within him, and these various factors, such as the paternal instincts, the possible delusions of enslavement. And I say possible because when you are in a restricted, confined area, you are essentially being treated as a slave. So the delusive spectrum is a little bit convoluted there. There is actually some form of enslavement transpiring, not saying that he doesn't deserve to be reprimanded in some form or fashion, but he is essentially in an enslaved and compromised position for which he saw fit to rise above.
Lawyers for Nichols say he was so deluded during the rampage, he believed he was a slave, rebelling against authority.
It's his war. And in Brian Nichols' war, he believed that he was a slave.
And thus he may have felt as though he succeeded in his attempts, although he did express remorse. And so in expressing remorse, we see that it wasn't his intention to simply murder. It was his intention to make a statement, and that statement of wanting to be free emancipated, and liberated was exacted in a most lethal way. Now let's briefly discuss the background of the actual perpetrator.
He was a conniving, vicious, cold-blooded, remorseless, evil, and extremely dangerous killer.
Brian G. Nichols, arguably one of the most notorious active shooters in America, and certainly the most notorious in Georgia history, was born December 10, 1971. Nichols grew up in a middle-class household in Baltimore, Maryland, and attended Cardinal Gibbons School. He later attended Kutztown University of Pennsylvania. In Kutztown, Pennsylvania, from 1989 to 1990, he played football and was known for having a knack for trouble. Nichols dropped out of college and moved to Georgia in 1995, where he worked for Hewlett-Packard and UPS. Betwixt 1996 and 1999, he was on probation for a felony drug case in Cobb County, Georgia. He was arrested with a small amount of marijuana. Amid the summer of 2004, Nichols was arrested on multiple charges for the rape, kidnapping, and assault of a former girlfriend after discovering that she was dating a minister from the church that they both attended. The first attempt at trial ended with a mistrial and a hung jury. While awaiting a second trial, friends and family members of Nichols expressed concern that he would attempt to escape, having tried to formulate an escape plan with a friend. And even when touching upon his background, we see that the theme of escape was already deeply ingrained and embedded within his thought process. And so he had been planning and formulating for quite some time now. And so the escape essence and the emancipation essence was always wanting to be birthed as a timeline for him to traverse through. And the criminal justice officials that were in the vicinity of this timeline desiring to be ushered forth were unfortunately victims that fell prey to the actuality of his desired reality. And in delving a bit deeper, if he actually had a vendetta against the criminal justice system or authorities in general, I don't feel as though he would have expressed any form of remorse or desired any form of forgiveness, because he would have felt that his efforts were justified. And thus, that's why I feel that these officials were essentially casualties of his desire for freedom, even in lieu of him putting himself in the predicament to be held captive. Now let's illuminate the lives of these victims that unfortunately fell prey to Nichols' rampage.
Even the lead prosecutor broke down.
We fought for justice for 4 wonderful people, 4 innocent people.
Many family members of the victims were not satisfied with the sentence, like the daughter of a slain court reporter.
My family and I watched in horror and disgust while Nichols' entire defense team stomped all over the justice system.
The wife of a deputy sheriff.
He never once showed to me any remorse, constantly sitting in his chair with a smirk on his face.
And the wife of a federal agent, Nichols' final victim.
Brian Nichols' parents raised an extremely evil person.
Superior Court Judge Rowland Barnes was 64 years of age when he passed away. He was born on April 25, 1940. He was an American Superior Court judge in Fulton County, Georgia. Barnes attended Frankfurt High School in Germany and Lebanon Valley College in Annville, Pennsylvania, from which he graduated in 1962. He studied business and then law at Georgia Washington University, and then graduated from Emory University School of Law in Atlanta, Georgia in 1972. At the time of his death, he held the title of adjunct professor at Emory. Barnes had served as a city judge and a magistrate before his appointment by Governor Zell Miller to the Fulton Superior Court in 1998. The second victim, court reporter Julie Ann Brandow, was 46 years old at the time of her death. Julie was the angel of the Fulton County Superior Courthouse as the court reporter for Judge Rowland Barnes for many years. Because of her devotion to her job and personalized touch of giving to others, she will be deeply missed and fondly remembered by all who knew her. She was a loving and dedicated mother, sister, aunt, and friend. The third victim was Sergeant Hoyt Teasley, 43 years of age at his passing. Mr. Teasley was a sergeant with Fulton County Sheriff Department, where he proudly protected the citizens of Atlanta for 19 years. Keith was a loving husband and father. He was also a wonderful son, brother, friend, neighbor, and colleague. His calling to serving people and his country was reflected in the life he lived each and every day. He served in the United States Air Force for 4 years active duty and 16 years reserve service in the Air Force National Guard. The fourth victim was U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Special Agent David Wilhelm. He was 40 years of age at his passing. Wilhelm and his wife moved to Atlanta in November, where Wilhelm was second in command of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office. Friends remembered him as a hard worker who earned money by milking cows as a teenager, repossessing cars, and cleaning carpets while studying criminal justice. Wilhelm had been a customs agent for 18 years, working previously in North Carolina and Virginia on cases involving financial investigations, narcotics, and human smuggling. He wasn't satisfied to be mediocre in anything he did. He was the real deal. In addition to the 4 slain victims, there were also 2 surviving victims, as well as a handful of additional hostages. I will only be going over 2 of the surviving victims' backgrounds. Cynthia Hall was 51 years of age at the time of the brutal beating that led her into being in a coma and subsequently left her with extensive brain damage. Subsequent to the brutal attack, she became involved with Side-by-Side Brain Injury Clubhouse, of whom honored the Fulton County Deputy Sheriff for her heroism before, during, and after the courthouse shootings in March 2005. Cynthia suffered from PTSD and cognitive issues. Her anonymity was maintained as she received supportive recuperative services. She has prevailed far beyond her saddening circumstances, continuing to lead with loving kindness, employing sincere efforts to be of assistance in a multitude of capacities, and has reportedly helped children with cancer. On February 23, 2015, she was commended for her service by the Georgia State Senate. In respect to factors that may have compromised Mrs. Hall's safety, some have argued that the stark contrast betwixt the 51-year-old 5'2" female deputy and the 33-year-old 6-foot-tall suspect she was assigned to guard was a key factor in what allowed him to get her gun, pointing to the tragedy as a downfall of affirmative action, according to Fox News. By far the most highlighted surviving hostage victim is that of Ashley Smith. She was born on August 1, 1978, and her birthplace is that of Augusta, Georgia. As it relates to life experiences, Daniel Max Smith was Ashley's volatile first husband and the father of her daughter, Paige. He died in her arms in August of 2001 after being stabbed in the heart during a brawl with a former friend. In recounting her hostage ordeal, Mrs. Smith was transformed from hostage to heroine. She mentioned that she was extremely scared. She thought that he was going to seriously harm her when he came in with tape and electrical cord. She thought initially he was going to bind her with the tape and strangle her with the cord. Narrowly escaping her deepest fears, She was not actually strangled by the extension cord. However, she was held bound and captive in her very own bathroom. Interesting how Mr. Nichols deeply desired to escape captivity. However, here he is holding someone else captive. And thus we see the projective nature of the criminal mind. Whilst she was bound in the bathroom, her captor Nichols inquired as to whether she had any marijuana. She told him she didn't, but that she had some ice or crystal meth. He unbounded her, and she retrieved the crystals from a pouch that she kept hidden beneath the fold of her comforter. On the bathroom counter, she prepared 3 lines for him to snort. She says that the drugs seemed to calm Nichols down to the point that he was exhibiting remorse for the killings. Ms. Smith stated that although drugs had been a way of life that had consumed her for many years, and being confronted with the decision to indulge in drugs with Nichols, she was granted the ultimate opportunity to shift the course of her life forever. She has reported that by the grace of God, she has not utilized illegal drugs since the day before the hostage ordeal transpired. Subsequent to the hostage situation, on March 23, 2005, less than 2 weeks after she was taken hostage, Mrs. Smith received $72,500 in reward money from various agencies, including the United States Marshals Service and the FBI, for alerting authorities to Nichols' whereabouts after he had let her go. Subsequent to capture, on March 15, 2005, Nichols makes his first court appearance after being captured. On May 5, 2005, a Fulton County grand jury indicts Nichols on 54 counts, including 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault on a police officer, 18 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, 2 counts of aggravated battery, 7 counts of kidnapping and kidnapping with bodily injury, 7 counts of armed robbery, and 5 counts of robbery by force, theft by taking, escape, and hijacking motor vehicles.
Nichols faced lethal injection.
Asked to count 28, please.
But after deliberating for 4 full days, a jury of 12 could not agree on the death sentence. They're split 9-3 in favor of execution.
In Georgia, it takes all 12 individuals at a unanimous decision in order to give the death penalty.
Jurors saw more than 1,000 pieces of evidence in a trial that lasted some 3 months and cost Georgia taxpayers millions. Anything short of a death penalty was viewed as a failure by prosecutors, who turned down an offer by Nichols to plead guilty to the murder charges if the state took death off the table. The task of sentencing Nichols now falls on Judge James Bodiford, who may choose only between life in prison and life without parole.
I thank you all kindly for tuning in to Serene Eminence's rendition of case coverage regarding the Brian Nichols case. I very much look forward to covering the trilogy of Courthouse Homicide cases to come, as well as the surprise bonus compilation at series end. And until next time, you all stay safe, stay stealthy, and stay serene.
If I could go back and do things differently, of course I would. I can't play the hand that I wish I was dealt. I have to play the hand that I have.